Monarchy. A system of governance where a single person, often a king or queen, holds supreme authority. In the modern times, monarchies serve as a symbol of unity, cultural identity, and historical continuity. In nations like the United Kingdom, Japan, and Eswatini, monarchies have survived into the modern era, adapting to contemporary governance systems while preserving tradition and culture. In the African country of Zimbabwe, a land rich with cultural heritage, a king hasn't been heard of in over 100 years. The country finds itself at a crossroads to bring back echoes of a bygone era of kings.
Ubukhosi bakithi babuvele bukhona izolo kanti busekhona futhi lanamuhla. Ubukhosi buqhakathekile esizweni sakithi ngoba ibona obukwazi ukuthi busiphe i-guidance to impilo yethu singabantu namasiko ethu ukuze angasilahlekeli.
Monarchy, if you're looking at it as a whole, I know we're zoning into Zimbabwe, but as a whole, it has certain social values. There are certain classes socially. But the truth is, when you weigh the social benefits today versus the costs of it and everything else that's required to be met, the conditions that are required to be met, it would more likely create more problems to reinstate the monarchy. And I don't think it's actually possible at all. I don't think it's actually something that's possible to be done.
In today's world, monarchies often serve ceremonial roles, acting as custodians of culture and tradition. They provide a sense of stability and continuity in a rapidly changing global landscape. But in some African nations, monarchies are more than symbolic. They're central to governance, influencing land distribution, conflict resolution, and local administration. The decline of Zimbabwean monarchies began with the collapse of the Munumutapa state in the late 17th century, weakened by internal strife and Portuguese interference. The Rhoji, another Shona state, rose to prominence but fell in the early 19th century, succumbing to invasions from the Nguni people during the Mpekane upheaval. The Kalanga kingdom, known for its cultural and political influence, also disintegrated under external pressure, including incursions by the Ndebele, who established a powerful state in Matabeleland under King Mzilikazi. His successor, Lobengula, faced the growing threat of British imperialism. In the 1880s, the British South Africa Company, led by Cecil Rhodes, used deceitful strategies, treaties, and military force to subdue the Ndebele, culminating in the First Matabele War of 1893 and the loss of sovereignty. To consolidate control, the British enacted laws dismantling traditional governance structures, replacing monarchies with the colonial administration. The Native Reserves Ordinance and Land Apportionment Act marginalized indigenous rulers, erasing centuries of autonomy and cultural legacy, marking the tragic end of Zimbabwe's historic monarchies.
Weli-ke ubukhosi bakithi basebuchithwa-ke ngamakhiwa ngo-1893 bachitheka ubukhosi bakithi.
So-ke ekufikeni kwabo bafike babuchitha ubukhosi, bachitha amasiko ethu, to introduce their system. Esahamba sayemukela ngoquku ngobunzima, sifoswa ukubana sibe ngamakholwa, siphiwa incwadi ebhalwe yibo, salahla ukukhonza uNkulunkulu ngendlela yethu yosiko kumbe eyesintu kumbe eyabarozi.
Post-independence, Zimbabwe adopted a centralized democratic system, relegating traditional leaders to ceremonial roles. Chiefs became subordinate to government-appointed officials, while kings were left in the past. Today, a movement is growing to restore monarchies in Zimbabwe. Supporters argue that traditional leadership is key to preserving culture and addressing historical injustices. For some people, reviving the monarchy could heal the wounds left by colonization and create a sense of unity. Amongst these supporters are those of the Khumalo clan, who have been at the forefront of advocating for the restoration of the Ndebele monarchy.
Imbali yamaNdebele isukela emuva esingathi thina kuseNguniland okunamhlanje kubuzwa neZululand lapho ekade thina amantungwa oKhumalo lezinye izizwe kade siziphethe ebekade sikhona.
Ubukhosi bakithi ngoba enkosi uMzilikazi amakhosi elama inkosi uMzilikazi ezamuva kodwa umdabuli wesizwe ongumbumbi wesizwe samaNdebele inkosi uMzilikazi okaMachobana nguyena ongumbumbi wesizwe samaNdebele esihlanganisa inhlanga zonke zamaNdebele silawo kulele lakithi eMathebeleland naseMidlands. Ngakho ngemva kwayo inkosi yakithi isikhotheme ngo-1868 ithe isikhotheme inkosi yakithi yasiselanywa inkosi uLobhengula nguyena owathatha ubukhosi obuyibona obachithwa ngamakhiwa khonale emuva futhi ngo-1893.
Ibala elithi Ndebele it's a compound name, alimeli amanguni kuphela. Ngasikhuluma ngamaNdebele sikhuluma ngesizwe esibunjwe yizizwe ephose zidlula ezingu-13 uMzilikazi azivuthelela ndawonye. Eqala ngamantungwa asuka lawo eNguniland. Ekhapha intaba zoKhahlambe kungena amaSuthu phakathi. Kungena namaGodonga esathatha ePitoli. Kusuke lapho kungene lamaVenda, lamaTswana, yonke imihlobo le. Size sisengena la. Sithe sesingene lapha kwangena ezinye izizwe sasithola la. AmaKhalanga angena ngaphakathi. LamaVenda amanye sathola lapha, lamaSuthu amanye sathola lapha angena ngaphakathi. Kwaze kwathi lamaShona angena ngaphakathi.
The road to reviving the monarchy in Zimbabwe has been turbulent, marked by bitter disputes, bold claims, and a tangled web of power struggles. At the heart of this conflict lies the House of Khumalo, where internal rifts have turned a cultural revival into a dramatic battle for legitimacy.
Ngo-1894, inkosi uLobhengula isinyamalele. Kwahle kwavele kwaqala khonapho ukudingwa ukuthoza kwelama inkosi ngubani. uRose wayezwa indaba leyo. Uthe eseyizwile uRose ngoba wayengafuni ukuthi kube lenkosi. Ngoba besanda ukudiliza isizwe samaNdebele. uRose wasethatha abantwana bonke abaqualified. Wathathwa abantwana abayibo ababengelama inkosi. Basuswa kuleli lizwe. Bahanjiswa eEastern Cape.
Kuthe sekukuleyo nqushunqushuke ngo-1896 izinduna zifuna ukubona ukuthi kati pho sigcobe bani kubantwana benkosi uLobhengula. Kwakhanya abanye sebesita kubuyelwe emuva endlini yenkosi uMzilikazi bekhomba ufezela. Kodwa owagcina egcothiwe nguNyamande.
Amakhiwa ambamba amdipota ambisele eEastern Cape. Bambiza ngeforeign. Kodwa yena engumntwana enkosi ongazange azicabangele, ongazange azisukele yena lapha esithi ufuna ukuyahlala eEastern Cape engayazi le Eastern Cape yakhona. Kodwa bamthatha bamfaka khona. Sethi nxa esebuya lapha sebefuna ukumgcoba lapha ekhaya sebesithi akusiye umuntu wala.
uNyamande wagcotshwa ngemva kwenkosi uLobhengula. Wagcotshwa ngamasiko aphelele esiNdebeleni. Kepha akalibusanga. Yingakho namhlanje you will never find it on record ukuthi King Nyamande. There is no such. Wabuye ke futhi emva kwaleyo mzamo ke siyawabona futhi amakhiwa abantu bakithi mabezama ukuvusa ubukhosi ngoba buke bazanywa futhi ukuvuswa buvuswa kungubo yenja. La wagcina efeka abhlungu kumntana enkosi ngoba wafe ngasakhulumi uNguboyenja bazama kodwa-ke lokhuyana it was a ploy into yakhona nje eyokuthi kuvuswe sekuvuswa ngoNguboyenja kwakuvele sekunesandla sesithathu amakhiwa ayesefisa ukuthi ubukhosi lobu abuthi nxa buvuka buvuke buvukele emntwini abazomcontrola base bevele sebefaka amakhala abo phakathi kwento yobukhosi bakithi kwehlula-ke futhi belu okukaNguboyenja kwabuye kwazanywa futhi bafuna ukukuzama kuNjube kwabuye futhi nakhona akwanhlangazimuka nomoya nakho akusaphumelelanga yingakho namhlanje uzofica abanye besithi hayi ubukhosi bulele endlini kaNjube bakuthathela khona phansi kwake kwazanywa kwehlula bese sibona futhi namhlanje labaKanyamande labo bethi hayi kungapha ngakithi isizathu ukuthi lakho koNyamande kwagcotshwa pho-ke ngoba silandela umkhondo ukuthi umkhondo kade wasala kuphi masinjalo silandela umkhondo bese kugcina sekule confusion bese kuvuka ngapha abaKanyamande labo bethi hayi ngokwangakithi kuvuka okunye ngapha koNjube labo bathi hayi ngokwangakithi hayi-ke okwakoChuma kangikwazi angeke ngikhulume ngakho
ngemva kwalokho esebuyele emuva uNjube wazala abantwana khona abantu abakhabazalayo abaphumelele ukuphenduka la ngo-Albert Lorose beza lapha ngo-1926 baphenduka la yibo abafomi iHighlander bafihla indaba yobukhosi kuHighlander kwase kubuya isikhathi se-liberation struggle isikhathi se-liberation struggle isikhathi se-African nationalism sa-overpower into yobukhosi le yanga kwathula kwathi zwi sake sayiphakha lapha saqinisa ukuthi silwisa amakhiwa la avimba ubukhosi sawalwisa amakhiwa lana sawehlula sesiwehlule kade samakhiwa isivuka futhi.
In 2016, Stanley Raphael Chuma stepped into the spotlight, declaring himself the rightful leader of the Mtwagazi kingship. Born as Chuma, Stanley asserted that his true surname was Khumalo, a legacy, he claimed, tied to his great-grandfather, Kuhlumba Khumalo. According to Stanley, Kuhlumba adopted the Chuma surname after fleeing from King Lobengula, who had allegedly ordered his execution. Adding a mystical dimension to his claim, Stanley recounted visions he began experiencing in 2002, where he believed God had anointed him as King Mzilikazi II. But his bold proclamation was met with skepticism. Ndebele traditionalists and cultural scholars dismissed his lineage, arguing that only direct descendants of King Lobengula could rightfully lay claim to the throne. Despite this, Stanley persisted.
Sike sambona futhi ubaba uStanley uRaphael Chuma Khumalo ngoba angimazi isibongo sakhe ngoba njengoba sezwe ukuthi nguChuma ngwakithi eCholocho ke mina kodwa samthola futhi esenguKhumalo sangabe sisakwazi ukuthi hawu uChuma namhla usenguKhumalo kodwa samuzwa phela sesithi ngokaKhuhlumba yena angazi uKhuhlumba azalwe ngubani bani kuze kuyofika ngathi uthi nomuntu uzalwa kohlangabeza ya uthi ungwabo kusho yena kusho mina ngithi angimazi angimboni futhi mina kuyindima yakhe leyo kumbe ngabe uzama ukuvusa obunye ubukhosi kodwa phela angavusa benkosi loBhengula ngoba akalona isende lenkosi loBhengula.
Despite this, Stanley persisted, but his quest for the throne ended abruptly in 2017 when police blocked Stanley Raphael Chuma Khumalo's coronation. While authorities provided no clear reason for the intervention, then Minister of Rural Development, Promotion and Preservation of National Culture and Heritage, Abednego Ncube, condemned the coronation as treasonous in state media. Stanley Khumalo's ambitions did not end there. In 2022, he made headlines again with the bold and controversial proposal to invade the Bulawayo State House and declare his rule. Critics dismissed this as an act of desperation. To further complicate things, another faction of the Khumalo clan announced that it had identified Prince Peter Zwide Khumalo to be the next legitimate king. He would identify as King Nyamande Lobengula II. He is the great-grandson of King Lobengula, born of the house of Nyamande. Zwide has been the most recognizable face in the revival of the Ndebele monarchy since the 1990s, helping co-found the Mzilikazi commemoration.
Uyisemkhulu wayeyinkosi na. Ngawo ambabamkhulu engazange abe yinkosi, ngeke ngibe yinkosi. Silamasiko athize yiwo asisizayo ukuthi silandelise indaba yobukhosi. Okwakuqala engingakutsho ukuthi inkosi zala inkosi bantu abami. Ilisiko esilisebenzisayo esingonini. Okutsho ukuthi umntwana oba yinkosi uzalwa uyise eseqotshiwe seyinkosi.
In 2018, another faction of the House of Khumalo claimed to have ended speculation over the throne, which has remained vacant since 1893, by naming South African-born Bulelani Colin Khumalo as the only legitimate heir to the House of Khumalo, and therefore the Mtwagazi throne. His claim has come under great scrutiny from certain functions within the clan. Regardless of this, he seemed to be the front-runner as he has gained support from the different Khumalo branches and from other traditional leaders across Southern Africa. Bulelani's coronation was originally scheduled for March 2018, but faced legal challenges. Peter Zwide Galanga Khumalo won a court interdict, successfully stopping the ceremony, and the then Minister of Local Government, Public Works and National Housing, July Moyo, declared the coronation unconstitutional as there was no law in the country that allowed any monarchy. Nevertheless, in September 2018, traditional leaders and members of the Khumalo family secretly crowned Bulelani as the king of the Ndebele nation during a 7-day ceremony.
Lo ndaba ezithela imphikayo namhlanje weza lapha le10 years uyise zemtshengisa unkomo ezemtshengisa namakhumalo wonke la. Amaningi amakhumala akhona. Lamanye la claim kuba inkosi ayekhona khonapha.
Ubukhosi sifuna ukubuvusa lapho bacina khona. Yingakho mina ngingakhuluma ngababili, ngikhulume ngokaNyamande. Njengoba bese ngibekile ukuthi uNyamande bake bamsikiza ngobukhosi naye. Bese ngizokhuluma ngobukaBulelani ngoba naye futhi uNjube wake wasikizwa futhi ngabo. Kodwa njengoba sihlezi manje silapha, kasikabi nayo inkosi esigcotshiwe yahlala yazinza esihlalweni sobukhosi ngokosiko lwamaNdebele. Asikabi nayo eyahlala inkosi yokugcina eyagcotshwa yahlala yazinza esihlalweni sobukhosi bamaNdebele inkosi uLobhengula.
This issue of tug of war is normal in a succession to an office where there are benefits and there is a name. But also, it cannot go on endless, as if that thing is their project, is their object, which they can do willy-nilly. The people, the culture, the nation under which that came on to still has a say. In fact, it has a bigger say. So, in my view, the matter should leave the Khumalos and become a good nation.
The revival of traditional leadership extends beyond the Ndebele people. Recently, the Xhosa community of Zimbabwe crowned Prince MacLeod Chawe of Mbembezi as their leader under the Xhosa king. This decision marks a resurgence of Xhosa cultural identity in the region.
Inkosi ukumkani uzwelonke namaphakathayo athi ninomuntu wakwaChawe na okhona kulamaXhosa aseZimbabwe. Bathi bakhona abantu bawo. Kwakhutshwa igqiza lisiya eNqathu Eastern Cape. Lakhokhelwa nguMacLeod Chawe. Bathetha naye. Lapho bavuma khona abantu base Eastern Cape bakhe amaXhosa akhona. Namasiko amaXhosa aloke njengalawa ukuthi into ezenziwa eEastern Cape zenziwa apha ziyafana ngatwatsa.
In Matabeleland South, the Lozwi clan crowned Mike Moyo, also known as King Mambo, in 2019. The coronation was part of a larger effort by the Mambo Dynasty Trust to revive the Lozwi kingdom, which collapsed in 1835. However, Moyo's reign has been tumultuous, marred by internal divisions. His former spiritual advisor, Begimpilo Nyati, abandoned him after a legal dispute and shifted his allegiance to Timothy Chiminya. He recently appointed 8 chiefs and 11 assistants to govern the Bulawayo Metropolitan Province.
Ubukhosi babalozwi budala kakhulu njengoba ukhuluma dating back to kubo 10th century lapha sibona isigodlo sokuqala sabalozwi esasisendaweni esiyazi ngokuthi iMapungukwe eLimpopo kumbe northern part of South Africa lapho bekulenkosi yokuqala yabarozwi ngabo 1200 they migrated, they crossed the river, bahamba bayahlala endaweni esiyaziyo namhlanje ngokuthi yi-Great Zimbabwe. Sabubona ubukhosi buqhubeka futhi busuka ngale Mapungukwe kwaba lenkosi eyaba khona laphana okuthiwa nguChibamu Matosi. Sabona umntanakhe obizwa ngegama okuthiwa nguChangamire Tombo owayengugovernor ngapha southern part of the country eyayiguruswa by then. uChangamire Tombo wakhula la wadlodlobala. He became the father or the founder of the Rozwi Empire. Wazala futhi la umntana kodwa nguPasirarama. Ngize ngefika kuChirisamuru, uChirisamuru owayakha isigodlo sakhe endaweni esiyazi ngokuthi zintaba zikaMambo kumbe iManyanga. uChirisamuru lo simthola ezala umntwana ngegama elaziwa ukuthi ke nguMaratse Nyamazana Chiminya. Maratse wazala uToweshipi oThorwa Chiminya, kwazalwa obumujuru Chiminya, kwaze kwazalwa umuntu esimazi namhlanje ngokuthi nguTimothy Chiminya, our current Mambo Monomtapa.
Chiminya, who has proclaimed himself King Monomotapa, has arguably made the most controversial claims. In early 2024, he officially notified the Ministry of Local Government and the Zimbabwe Chiefs Council of his authority over all traditional leaders, including spirit mediums. He later filed a petition with the Chief Registrar of the Constitutional Court, seeking to halt government appointments of traditional leaders, asserting that they fall under his jurisdiction.
Ngiyafunga phambi kwakho Nkosi yami King Monomotapa ukuthi ngizasebenza ngaphansi kwesandla sakho ngithembekile. Ngibamba ihlangothi leMatabeleland South.
Phambi kwedala lika King Monomotapa uMambo owadeclare iZimbabwe ukuthi ibe hi kingdom. So mangilapha ngiyabe ngisithi mina koBulawayo asifuni tribalism, zasebenza ngingafuni itribalism. Ngibambanisa wonke ama languages. Ngisithi uking uyalithanda, ngizasebenza according ukuthi ungithume ukuthi senze njani.
Been doing or lobbying government sesihambisile amaphepha ngikhuluma as I'm talking right now. We gave them 5 days to respond to that through the Ministry of Justice ukuthi ke i-constitution it must change. Ama-chiefs ngama-traditional leaders. Inkosi is also a traditional leader, meaning ukuthi la inkosi according to that chapter yama-traditional leaders automatically qualifies to be there because he's a traditional leader. Kodwa esikufunayo ukuthi i-constitution yelizwe yeZimbabwe ithi recognize the king. Ngikhuluma ngamaphepha angenileyo and alapsileyo izolo. We gave them 5 days from last week ukuthi ke ba responde ukuthi batshintshe i-constitution yeZimbabwe ithi recognize King Monomotapa as our officially nationally Lozwi king. We gave them 5 days. They failed to respond. Meaning, amaphepha atholwe ngoKing Monomotapa right now ngoba is carrying a court order eyamgunyazayo owayiwinayo after kube le argument between the king and the local government by then eyayingafuna ukuthi imrecognize as a king. Indaba le yahamba as far as the high court. Ekufikeni kwayo e-high court ufike wayiwina uTimothy Chiminya and he was declared Mambo Monomtapa, and they failed to come and defend it. Uma kuyikuthi i-local government yayileqiniso elipheleleyo ukuthi ke uMambo Monomtapa engangeni, they were supposed to come and defend. They failed, and the judges bawinisa uMambo Monomtapa. He is an officially a Rosary king as we are speaking right now.
Chiminya's actions sparked outrage when he introduced a private member's bill in Parliament in 2024, proposing an amendment to Section 283 of the Constitution. This amendment sought to transfer the power to appoint traditional leaders from the Minister of Local Government to him.
Into enjengaleyo isuke ibe sisimanga. I-Constitution yeZimbabwe njengoba nebenibuza nje uba abantu basola le nale ubukhosi abukho obuka king kule Constitution. Into enjengaleyo kufanele iqale ithini iye eParliament ku-legislature ayikabi khona. I-Ministry of Local Government yayala yathi umuntu owenza njalo umreporteni emapholiseni ahamba yobanjwa. Ulungile seyile kunansika kujaji lo judge owathi semnika ubukhosi, but ubukhosi kumele kutshintshwe le Constitution ngangaye kuzawubuya into enjengaleyo. Uthetha ngento ezinjalo unjenje, yes siyayazi lonto, sithetha ngayo, sizawuyibona uba indungu nokuqaqaqa kuyawela phi na.
Engathi bawena icourt bayakwazi abakwenzayo, bahamba ecourt ngenxa yalabo bakwaziyo abafuna ukukwenza, bawena i-default judgment. And silindelo okwakumele ayi-aphile ukuthi ayi-aphile. Akasukume nxa efuna ukubona ukuthi kasonkosi, akasukume ayigcobe induna eyi-1. Anti induna zigcotshwa inkosi, kayigcobe induna eyi-1 isibonto inkosi.
Well, we can't say the one and all. Only the ministry there did not go and challenge when the claimant made the case in court. So by so doing, then by default, what I to say, because I made this case, then no one opposed, I get away with that knowledge. And go and say you cannot put the chiefs when I read the chiefs are installed following the constitution of the land. It means you are already violating the current constitution. You are saying if one were to have a monarchy, whatever level, whatever power, we don't expect that to violate the laws.
Kule court interdict eyamisa ukuthi sigcobe inkosi yethu ngokupheleleyo lapha elizweni leZimbabwe. Yithi thina amaNdebele isizwe lokuqala esaphuma lenkosi, safuna ukugcoba inkosi, samiswa yicourt. Siyamangala isizathu abasinika sona ukuthi i-Constitution yeZimbabwe ayila ngcenye evumela ukhosi. Batsho njalo. Khathesi isigaba esikuso silokho sisakhulumisana lohulumende. Sizama ngendlela zonke. Ngiyamangala ke mina namhlanje mali ngitshela ukuthi bathi sokule nkosi egcotshiweyo i-Constitution yeZimbabwe isithi yona akula provision yenkosi. Kuyamangalisa lokho.
Mawukhumbula kahle ekuqaliseni ngithe iZimbabwe is composed of 16 official languages. 16 official languages ngabantwana benkosi uMonomtapa dating back to 10th century going back there. Bebe ngabantwana benkosi uMonomtapa up to today, they are still the descendants and the children of the King Monomtapa. Spiritually, idlozi leZimbabwe cannot resuscitate two kings at a go. Spiritually, kabazinike isikhathi sokulalela kumbe sokumamela. They mustn't just argue out of the blue. Uzumuntu nje phongo ukuphikisa ukuthi inkomo le ibomvu nala athi mnyama into esegcekeni. we know ungahamba back ubuyele endlini kaKhumalo sorry uyifaka lapha ngoba iningi labantu abangani bayaphikisa yilaba abarozwe abangasazazi ukuthi ngabarozwe abakhulumisa indebele njengoba kade singikhulumisa indebele ngikhuluma ulimi lokweZulu olungeniswe kimi ngendluzulu olungeniswe kimi ngomkhonde ngingalwemukelanga ngingazange ngisho ukuthi ngiyafuna ukucolonize umzelikazi to get the point iningi labantu abangapha khathese emathebeleni I always say and I always teach kuma media shows kuma social media platforms kuma radios ukuthi in Mathebeleland there is what we call identity crisis. People abasazazi ukuthi they are Rozwi because of isindebele engisikhulumayo. We now associate ourselves with the Nguni people.
Supporters of the restoration of the monarch highlight several benefits: cultural preservation, community governance, and economic potential.
Ubukhosi bona buqhakathekile. And khona nje kuyinto enhle ukubana izizwe ngezizwe zivuselele ubukhosi bazo. Kulezinye izinto that the political leadership which the president, the MPs, the councillors cannot control, but thina abantu at cultural level bangakubamba njalo it kuyayenza abantu bebe proud ngokuba ngobani.
Ngiyakholwa kakhulu ukuthi ubukhosi kumele buvuselelwe ngoba uma ubukhosi bungavuselelwanga sizaba lohlupho lokulondoloza ubuntu bethu. Njengoba ngeke ngatsho ngathi inkosi iyawalinda amasiko. Kule micimbi ethize, kule mikhosi ethize esingeke siyenze uma singela nkosi. Njalo futhi phezulu kwalokho abantu basuka bazizwe ukuthi bangobani. Baqine ebuntwini bawo ngabe lenkosi lemikhuba ethize abayenzayo ngoba kule nkosi.
Ubukhosi buqhakathekile esizweni sakithi ngoba yibona obukwazi ukuthi busiphe i-guidance to impilo yethu singabantu namasiko ethu ukuze angasilahlekeli. Ukuqhakatheka kobukhosi kunje. Kulezi insuku nxa sithi siyananzelela siyabona ukuthi abantwana bayazalwa bese bephila impilo yesilungu bese belahlekelwa yibuyibona babo ukuthi bangobani abasazazi ukuthi bangobani nemvelaphi yabo yendabuko abasayazi bese kuphinde futhi kusilimaze kakhulu nangolimi ulimi lwakithi selufile alusekho ezingeni thina sakhula ngalo sesibona ukulimala kakhulu ngoba sesizwa lamagama esasingawazi ukuthi akhona asesetshenziswa ngabantwana becabanga ukuthi aqondile kanti awaqondanga.
Siswele inkosi okweminyaka emide yona leyo oyibonayo okhuluma ngayo izulukalisani elizweni imkhuhlane isibhahile elizweni sokukhona izinduna ezinye ezifeki ezafakwa ngabelungu ezingazange zi-appointwe spiritual.
But not everyone supports the restoration of monarchies. Serious questions are raised about the role of these monarchies in a time when they seem to be losing relevance in foreign countries where monarchies have ruled for years. Critics argue that reviving these institutions could bring political, social, and logistical challenges.
Monarchy, if you're looking at it as a whole, I know we're zoning into Zimbabwe, but as a whole, it has certain social values. There's certain classes socially. But the truth is, when you weigh the social benefits today versus the costs of it and everything else that's required to be met, the conditions that are required to be met, it would more likely create more problems to reinstate the monarchy. And I don't think it's actually possible at all. I don't think it's actually something that's possible. With the setting of Zim and with our very complicated history, that's all I'll say there, a very complicated history, it would create more division than unity.
Mulanyumo is two-faced for if I may say. You have the monarchy that is working for other countries that Tina is in terms of in how we've developed. Going back to the monarchy, with this the idea, we have evolved so much. For instance, it still makes sense in Makai because they've maintained those systems. But now it becomes a challenge. Now we should be a So in modern day Zimbabwe, I think existence, it's okay, these current setups, rather than if we later baby.
Well, I don't know whether the interest is from the majority of Zimbabweans or the interest is by those who believe they qualify to become monarchs. So there is this clamor to declare, I am this monarch, I am that monarch, I have this, these monarchies, as it were, tend to use spiritual justification or religious justification or claims through bloodlines. Things, of course, which are not easy to prove in most cases, which is why ultimately the whole thing must come back to the people.
I'll speak generally as Africans. The Africans were very a challenge of politicizing non-political issues. You might find as much as we can say certain monarchs are not allied to certain parties in Africa general, but we've seen how politicians have actually manipulated systems of traditional leaders in order to gain political mileage and in order to maintain stays in power. So, are we restoring them from a genuine perspective? And why are we restoring them now?
If you look at our elders when they went to the war, when they went to liberate the country, their intention was not to reinstate any monarchy. It was to move forward with the times. So all the different elders that that led the liberation war, their intention was to bring a socialist system of governance, because they knew that the monarchy system of governance, even worldwide, it was collapsing.
How would a revived monarchy coexist with Zimbabwe's democratic system? Critics warn of potential power struggles and confusion over authority. Currently, the Constitution of Zimbabwe recognizes the president as the head of state, with parliament sharing responsibility of governing the state. Chiefs hold more of a ceremonial role in their communities. The current political landscape does not offer a space for monarchy to exist. So how could a king fit in an already seemingly functioning system?
In the modern era, when you're restructured governance, you have to undergo a consultation process. Is it what the people want? Since we are calling ourselves a democracy, is it what the people want? Who have you consulted? How thorough are the consultations? If you consulted even Umtuana, who's 18 years old, or you are going to focus on Amakos like civic society, say Resident Association is a criminal residents party. When it comes to governance issues, we are supposed to go through a referendum again. Because now we now need a constitutional amendment. We are now moving because we really need to be honest about ourselves. And we're moving from being this government which is elected by the people, transitioning back to a constitutional monarchy. Because one way or the other, we need to be clear. There needs to be clarity.
We must also bear in mind that the Africans themselves rose to fight against colonialism, to restore and rebuild new societies, right? New institutions. And in their wisdom, when they negotiated the first Constitution for Independence, it was a Republican one. We didn't hear them talking of monarchs. We don't know why they think it means it was not popular. We start hearing about these things decades later. So we are saying we can't ignore that framework of a Republican setup. So when monarchs can be reintroduced, if they can be reintroduced with the interests of the people and those who are in power, of course, who have to determine, they have to factor that historical reality we are living in, that already people have decided a Republican democratic way of doing things. We might not have it the best we want it, but people decide to choose those who represent or who lead them. But when it comes to monarch, you're talking of royalty, you're talking of right by birth, by heritage. That's a different ballgame.
Look at social development, where the world is going. Most monarchies fell apart in the 17th and 18th century now, and most nations moved from the monarchy style of government to constitutional monarchies and republics, right? Where the government is run by the people for the people, you know what I mean? And there's separation of powers. You have a judiciary that's separate. You have a legislature that's separate. You have an executive that's separate. Whereas in a monarchy, the executive is the king and his family. The legislature is again the king, with some input, yes, of maybe the chiefs.
I will bring the example of the Ndebele, where I come from. We will know that in Ndebele monarchy, if we talk of King Nobekwana, for instance, he was not just a cultural figure. He was a religious figure, fine, but he was the head of state. He was the commander-in-chief. So when you now revive a monarch that only takes 5% of it, it's a relic. It's now a tourist thing, as it were. But I wouldn't talk of other cultures and other traditions. I don't know how powerful their monarchs were when they were there. But we are saying you are rebuilding something from the ashes. Definitely it can't be built back to what it was.
So we're going to create another tire conflict between Amani and where to strike that balance in terms of the role of our chiefs who be set up. What is the Mano Council chief? And how do you mark up boundaries?
Inking is a lack of trust from those that are in authority. System yelizwe ababusayo ngazani kabalaqiniso lokuthi singayenza ubukhosi sifuna ukwenza. So into omele iqali yenzayo ukubana beze bekuzwisisa ukuthi hayi thina kasilando kuye State House asikho lapho.
Akulani lo hulumeni okhona kathesi. We do respect our president and the government. Siyamhlonipha kakhulu upresident wethu ubaba uED Mnangagwa is doing a good job njengopresident welizwe, but lapha sikhuluma ngenkosi ebusayo spiritually. Eyakhe i-role has got nothing to do with politics. Eyakhe i-role igxile kakhulu esikweni lelizwe lamatshe when it comes to the Rosary people, when it comes to our Zimbabwe.
Into yokuqala omele sibeyazi ukuthi ubukhosi bungavula ivuka, uhulumende uzabe lokho ekhona. Imithetho kahulumende izabe lokho ikhona. Ubukhosi bukhangele ezamasiko. Sikhangele okwamasiko, ubukhosi kabusoze bubethe umthetho ozalawula ukuthi abantu kabahlamukele uhulumende. Ayisithe siqalayo ukuba lobukhosi.
Yingakho nanamhlanje ngasithi siyabuka, siyabona ukuthi ubukhosi bakithi abuqinanga. Ngani? Ngoba uhulumeni wakithi akakabo recognize. Yithi amaNdebele okufuneka senza ama-petition, ngoba ama-mistake ngibona ngathi mina enziwe ngabadala phambili. Kabazange abadala ba-realize ukuthi today's life lapho esiphila khona thina akusefani nemandulo ukuthi bangahlanganisa amakhanda bona bese bethi hayi ozoba inkosi nangu nguTimothy uzosibusa.
Upresident kule modern society ekhona ulomsebenzi wakhe. Inkosi layo ilomsebenzi wakhe. Sithe thina okumqoka kakhulu ukuthi inkosi imela ubuntu. Kwakufanele ukuthi aluba ngaphambi kokuba bathi usibanibani uzoba inkosi yethu, kwakufuneka baqale babe uhulumeni, kuqale kuamendwe i-constitution, ibe ne-clause efaka inkosi phakathi. Ngoba i-clause yakithi namhlanje ekhona ku-constitution, it caters for izinduna, not a king. Kwakufuneka i-approach yabadala iqale ku-constitution, bangene kwingatsha lezi ezifanele, iminyango efanele, kuqale kulungiswe udaba lwe-constitution, ku-amendwe i-constitution. Bangaqali ngokukhetha umuntu, kabaqale nge-institute ye-king egoqela i-amendment of Zimbabwe Constitution. Manje ngibona ngathi abadala baqale lapho kwakumele ukuthi ngabe bagcine khona. Yikho lalamhla kunje.
Unlike Eswatini, Lesotho and Morocco are constitutional monarchies and only hold ceremonial positions, which some argue shows that democracy and monarchy can coexist. Restoring a monarchy would require significant resources, Critics question whether a country facing economic hardships can afford this revival. Monarchies can be expensive. They bring family and a fleet of staff and other expenses. The Zulu royal family costs the KwaZulu-Natal government about $4 million every year, while the Eswatini monarchy costs taxpayers about $62.5 million annually. This is nothing compared to the $105 million spent by the British royal family every year. Most of the significant portions of funds is spent on maintaining royal residences, security, extravagant lifestyle, and their immediate and extended family members. Questions have been asked on how these new kings in Zimbabwe will be funded, as taxpayers are already frustrated by the high taxes in the country, may not be willing to fund people whose role isn't clear yet.
In terms of financing, I'm a monarch now. Who's going to finance? Is the burden going to be pushed into our taxpayers? Already we feel like we are overtaxed as a country. Is it going to fall back to me again as a ratepayer? What I can say is we don't have the financial muscle to actually finance such a process or to actually finance this restructure, because you are now restructured on government.
If we look at in some countries, for instance, you look at cross-border here in SA, the owner will have a budget, and then the budget obviously comes from the taxpayer. Whoever will be funding, they are not self-funded, they are not donor-funded, they are funded from the taxpayers. Just like it happens already with the chiefs. People say, the government has given the chiefs cars, the government has put electricity. No, it's cars, it's citizens, that's taxpayers' money.
I-budget izavela kuhulumeni, imali izophuma ku-local government. I-budget ayiphuma emalini yethu, ama-taxpayers. I-government ikwazi ukukhipha i-budget eyakuphi ebukhosini. Ubukhosi buyehlisele ezinduneni. Kuzaba lula. Imali ngeyethu ikhona ku-government.
As soon as the constitution of this country recognize the king, automatically it means the government must have a budget for the king. In as much the government has a budget of the local government, traditional leaders, okuzaba nzima kuyini ukuthi babele certain portion or amount or a figure that will come from the coffers of this country to take care of the king.
Inkosi yabantu uvele naphi na kufanele kube nebudget yenkosi njengoba uhulumende ene-budget yenkosi.
The lifestyle they give, the security that goes with it, the protocol, the pros that go with them, the lavish parties that they throw. Someone pays, and that someone is the citizen, that community.
Who would ascend the throne? Historical disputes over royal lineage could reignite old tensions within communities. Conflict regarding the Ndebele succession has played out like a soap opera in the media, while claims of the Munumutapa lineage has left some baffled, causing tribal tensions in the country. There is fear that the idea of kings in the land could reopen up old wounds and cause massive tribal rifts within a country that has deep-seated tribal tensions.
Dating back to 1000, we have been under one king, one Rose king. Sinjalo singama 16 official languages emkhulume ngawo. Akula nkosi yamaTonga, akula nkosi yamakhalanga, akula nkosi yamashona, akula nkosi yamavenda, akula nkosi yabesuthu, akula nkosi yababedi, akula nkosi yani bonke bona laba abantu inkosi yabo inye uMonomtapa. Listen to Venda. Venda is close to Shona. Shona is close to Kalanga. Kalanga is close to Nambia. Nambia is close to Tonga. Ngifuna nje just to name the few. Bedi is close to Venda. Bedi is close to Sotho, is close to Tswana. Lobedu, just one and the same. What does that mean? Singabantwana bendoda yinye dating back. Angisho lokho abakukhuluma ukuthi thina we are just imposing a king over them. That is totally wrong.
Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Democracy has fumera kuloko, constitution has fumera kuloko, but what I can say is If you go back historically, did Motapa ever rule over the Ndebele? Did Motapa rule over the Kalanga, for instance? When Motapa ruled, he's back there in Elang. He may place back there and see the teapot shaped like how we like to get into this teapot shaped like. It wasn't like that. A lot has changed. So you're saying, this is going your land. You're basing on what? On which boundaries of society? Because now you need to overlap to other countries such as Mozambique. Today, do Mozambicans identify themselves there? The subjects of Mononta. Are they going to pay tribute to him also? You are already saying one tribe is superior to the other. When you are saying these other tribes, the Shoda will not bow down to Mbele kings or Tonga kings or Kalanga kings, but the other tribes will bow down to Mononta. On what grounds? But your qualification yet to I
don't think a single institution can unite Zimbabweans. If we believe there is some division in society, the divisions run across economic systems, political, ethnic, historical, with a lot of pain that remains unsolved. I don't see any king for that matter. And I think the spokesperson or the claimant of Mononta, in my view, was arrogant when he came to Matabeleland and said it's above everyone. How do you say it's above everyone? And the people around there say this one, by virtue of the station that he holds in Bani, I think is above the local leader. But you don't come and claim to be above people, because your power does not come from elsewhere. It must come from those who came to rule. So even if you go historical, no one can have a claim over people basing on history. People left to decide whether they want to resuscitate. And as I said earlier on, there is no single ruler in history who ruled the country as Zimbabwe is constituted now. That is false. That is a lie. That is someone who wants to mislead me.
AmaXhosa anamasikawo, amaNambia namaTonga anamasikawo, amaNdebele nawo anamasikawo, anobukhosi bawo. Ngoba awusoze udibanise amasiko abantu ehlukene, ayizuhamba kakuhle lonto le.
Unganginika wena iNdebele culture yabo yeMatabeleland? Ayikho. They dress like the Ngunis. Imgido nale belikhuluma ngayo emhlahlandlela kube kusenziwa imgido yangaphi? YesiZulu. Ingaphi imgido kaMthokazi? Ingaphi attire kaMthokazi? I-attire egqokwe ngabantu abathi ngabakaMthokazi ngiyamanguni. Ulimi abalukhulumayo ngolwamanguni. Umgido abayigidayo ngiyamanguni. Konke imkhosi abayigubhayo ngiyamanguni. Then ekaMthokazi ingaphi njengoba bethi bona bayilizwe on their own. Ilizwe lilosiko lwalo. Isizwe silembatho yaso. Isizwe silenkosi yaso. Ngakho ukuthi bona abakaMthokazi besithi balenkosi yabo bethi thina we are imposing a king over them. Si imposa ngaphi? Ngoba inkosi lesikhuluma ngayo iselizweni layo. Injelele ikuleli lizwe leZimbabwe. Ayikho koZulu. ITanangombe isemathebeleland. IKami isemathebeleland. Intaba zikaMambo zisemathebeleland. IDulabadzimu isemathebeleland. Just to name the few. Abojilo basemathebeleland. Isigodlo sokucina senkosi yabalozwi sisemathebeleland. uChirisamulu khona
uhlupho ngalabo bantu ukuthi bakhangela inkosi ngelinye ilihlo ethina singayikhangelanga ngalo. Thina kasikhangelanga inkosi yethu ukuthi umisi bakhona iyebusa abanye abantu, azikhangelanga lolo. Zonke izizwe zivunyelwe ngazi kubona kufanele ukuthi zibe lenkosi yabo. Umtapa ncaye ngaba khona angithi labantu bakaye babusa kaye ebantwini bakababusa kuyegcina imkhuba yabo, ngoba imkhuba yethu ayifani. Ngakho kuzaba nzima kakhulu ukuthi singaba lenkosi benye kuthi uMtapa uzaba inkosi yethu. Hayi, imikhuba yethu iyachiyana.
Angizukukugxeka-ke mina lokhuyana okukaMtapa ngoba akukhona okwakithi. Elakithi izwe siyalazi ukuthi lalingelamaNdebele. Pho-ke nxa kuzovela abezizweni bethi bona bangamakhosi, ngibona kubalungela ukuthi babe ngamakhosi ezweni lakubo ngoba izwe leli sikhumbula ukuthi ilizwe lenkosi uMzilikazi elabuswa inkosi uLobhengula kufuneka silazi ukuthi laliqala ngaphi lisiyagcina ngaphi. Okungakubi ukuthi bese bethi bona ngoba ngake ngakubona ukuthi ingathi bathi bona bafuna ukubusa iZimbabwe yonke, kube yibo futhi abazosibekela lezi nduna zakithi abazazigcoba ezasesindebeleni. Bese ngisithi kuliphutha elikhulu kakhulu lelo ngoba ubukhosi bakithi thina siyabazi ukuthi bagcina kubusa inkosi uLobhengula. uMtapa thina kasimfitsanga lapha. Lelizwe inkosi uMzilikazi yathi fika kulo elasedlabunondo, yathi fika inkosi yakithi yafica kungekho nkosi eyayikhona kulelizwe.
Bathini nge-spiritual center power yabaRozwi eyinjelele? Phela uMzilikazi azange kuyethola intaba. uMzilikazi uthe ngena kuleli lizwe wafica kulabantu, wabuya labantu abangu-500. Wathola abalozwi ababechiwe nguToweshiphi, wathola abalozwi ababechiwe nguChirisamuru. Wehluleke ukuhlalisana loToweshiphi. Impose inkosi ebantwini, inkosi iselizweni layo, ilandwe ngumuntu nkhaya, wayingenela emzini wayo. Umuntu lo wafika wathumba abantu, wakha isizwe ngabantu bakhe, wabafundisa ulimi lwakhe losiko lwabo. Esebafundisile ama-descendants akhe ayithi thina esikhuluma isiNdebele. Ngenxa yokukhuluma isiNdebele sesizibona ngazathi thina we are South Africans. We are not South Africans. uNdlovu is Jo, uSibanda nguShumba, uNyathi nguMakonde, uNyoni nguHungu, uNcube nguSoko. These are Rozwi people. Inkosi yabo kungumoyo uMambo.
Okuzayenza ukuthi into le ingabahambeli kahle bona bakaMnu Mtapa ukuthi bafuna ukuvuselela ubukhosi beqabantu bangacitshwa obunye ubukhosi. Khonokho kuyadabula isizwe kakhulu. Ubukhosi bakaMnu Mtapa bukhona kabube khona lapho kumele bube khona. Obakomthwakazi bukhona kabube khona lapho kumele bube khona.
Kayiklemi iMatabeleland yiguruzwa. eMatabeleland before 1840 there was nothing like Matabeleland. Indawo le namhlanje siyiMatabeleland iguruzwa. So ubusa abantu bakhe abangabalozwi asebelahlekile. Very funny part of it, most of the people now abakhuluma isikhalanga kumbe abakhuluma isiNdebele, amadlozi akhona angafika akhuluma isishona, akhuluma isikhalanga, akhuluma isiTonga, akhuluma isivenda. Uzibuza ukuthi why? Angisho for your own information, mina I don't even speak Shona. Angisazi isishona, but likhona ikhehle likimi elikhuluma isishona. Meaning what? Ukuthi amRozwi
kule ngasikhuluma into lezi kumele sikhulume njengabadala, siyenze into ezakhayo. Awenzi awuhlokozi inyosi, and sonke siyakwazi ukubana into abayenza yena leyo bahlokoza inyosi. Awungeke ubhode lokho abakwenzile emalokitshini la bethi bakhetha izinduna. Uzangena emalokitshini ukhethe izinduna zohlangothi lunye njani, zomhlobo munye njani, endaweni okwaziyo ukubana isigodlo senye inkosi. Yikuzama ukudala umsini. And ngithanda ukubonga abantu bakomthwakazi, bayekelile nje abantu bazihambela nje abantu abangakwananga, ngoba ngabe babakhangelile bekuzoliwa, kodwa umthwakazi ngokuthanda ukuthula bazithulela nje baqhubeka ngamalanga wonke. Yikho ubona emadolobheni kwafika kwakhethwa amakhansila. Amakhansila they cut across tribe. Kwakhethwa ama-residence association, they cut across tribes. Angithi ukwenza ukuthi wonke umuntu feels ukuthi we are well represented.
People don't know how easy it is for post-colonial societies to break down over small deals. They break down not on the big issues. Fine, the big issues will be there, simmering, but someone comes and just ignites through foolishness.
Zimbabwe stands at a crossroads now. more than ever. The restoration of monarchies could offer a way to reconnect with its rich heritage while addressing past injustices. On the other hand, it could create rifts within a country that still battles with its past. But success depends on finding a solution that balances and respects both tradition and modernity. The current political landscape does not offer a space for monarchy to exist, but those who advocate for it continue to fight for its restoration as the desire to connect with their culture and heritage spurs them on.
Asisobelungu thina. Ungabona isizwe esinganama-cultures awo sine-tradition yalo sifile eso sizwe eso.
I can confirm it spiritually ukuthi-ke uMona Mtapa nguye inkosi yeZimbabwe. Siyamazi sonke, ukhona ku-social media, siyamlandela, sikhuluma ngaye imihla lamalanga. Yiyo inkosi egcotshiweyo spiritually, futhi waphinda wayowina indaba e-High Court. He is carrying a High Court order emdeclareayo King kumbe Mambo Mona Mtapa officially.
Thina kasijahanga lutho ngoba sikhona la. Bajakile bona ngoba bayakwazi ukuthi mbayimbayi sebengafuna enye inkosi phezulu kaChiminya, njengoba nangu uma ikhosi asekhona sokulo Chiminya kuza inkosi kade ziyabambili njani. Bafuna ukuvusa impilo abantu elizweni. uChiminya lo Mike bazakulwa, uMambo lo Mona Mtapa bazakulwa, kade ziyabambili njani. Into esifisa ukuthi ngabe silwa, hayi kanti kumele bebange kingdom yabo. Kabalwele khona ngale ku kingdom yabo yabo. Ngapha sizilungiselo kwethu.
I think it will create more divisions. I think already just mentioning it with all the talk that's going on right now is already further dividing and stirring up a lot of problems for people. Because if you really look at it, whoever then people establish or appoint as king or whatever, the different courts decide, okay, we're going to have this person as our king for this tribe or for that tribe, right? Either way, there's still going to be people within that group who will not agree.
Isizwe sakithi koMthwakazi asilayo inkosi, asikayizuzi inkosi, silambele inkosi, siyayifuna, sinje singamantungwa siyayifuna inkosi, asikakabi nayo.
Kodwa ngingathanda ukulitshela khona ukuthi umbuso bantu abami kawucelwana njengegwayi. Umbuso uyadutshekelwa, umbuso uyalwelwa, umbuso uyamelwa. Ukuthi ngalitshela kahle kahle ukuthi sizabe sisenzani, esizakwenza okubalulekileyo ukuthi sibe silokhu esikhulumisana labo, kodwa kuzamele ukuthi sihambele phambili.
So when it comes to this issue, it can't be the two groups. What is special about Ndebele and Chol? When it comes to culture and tradition, or ownership, or belonging to the people, there's nothing exceptional about them, except that they are most vocal. But I would say, if I belong to one of the groups, there's nothing special about being Ndebele. There's nothing special about being Shona. There's nothing special about being Tonga or Venda. We are all equal Zimbabweans with the right to a say in the way we are carving the religious, in political, cultural lines. So if other groups, other stakeholders in this country are not part of the debate, I can bet you it is going to fail.
The revival of monarchies in Zimbabwe reflects a broader struggle over identity, tradition, and modern governance. These competing claims raise complex questions about legitimacy, culture, and the role of traditional leadership in a constitutional democracy. As these debates rage on, the voices of both supporters and detractors echo across Zimbabwe, shaping a narrative that is as much about history as it is about the future. The question remains, can Zimbabwe embrace its past while moving forward? The answer lies in the hearts of its people and the wisdom of its leaders.